Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Podium Election 2024 coverage. I'm Dylan Cleland with you here. We're talking today to Lou Gentile, a former state senator in Eastern Ohio. Lou, thanks for joining us today. We want to talk about some of the developments that we've seen in the last 48 hours. Obviously, it was a very historic week last week with the assassination attempt of President Trump. Then it led to J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator, being nominated. The RNC takes place, and then Sunday we hear from President Joe Biden that he's going to withdraw from the race. Your thoughts on the president's decision to do that?
Yeah, there's never a dull moment in 2024, is there? First of all, I think you have to say, regardless of your political affiliation, that President Biden made the best decision that he felt was in the best interest of this country. And he put the country over himself. And I think it should be a lesson to American politicians today. Look, he'll go down in history as one of the greatest presidents. He created 15 million jobs. He delivered a massive infrastructure package. He did a lot to rebuild this country coming out of COVID, navigating a really difficult pandemic. And so he was really the right person at the right time, and obviously was able to defeat Donald Trump. But now, the Democrats over the last several weeks certainly have been, really, I think, unenergized and unenthused with all the criticism and questioning. And so now President Biden made the decision to step aside in this race and enter Vice President Harris. And I think we've seen a lot of the energy completely shift and momentum shift in this race.
What do you think it was ultimately that made President Biden decide to send that letter out to the American people on Sunday? Do you think it was maybe family? Do you think it was just all of the pressure from lawmakers or the pooling of donations and funding?
Well, I really do think that President Biden does care about this country. And as he has articulated, I think greatly concerned about the future of this country. And so I think his decision was in the best interest of the nation and to preserve our democracy moving forward, that it was in his best interest and the country's best interest, frankly, to step aside and allow the vice president to assume the head of the ticket. I think the president's still well positioned to continue serving in that capacity, but trying to manage both a White House and a campaign are two difficult things at the same time. And I think he made the right decision. And ultimately, the Democrats, as you see, are really rallying around, really in an unprecedented way, rallying around the Vice President Harris.
And speaking of Vice President Harris, she gets endorsed by President Biden just a little bit after he makes that announcement. By Sunday night, several other lawmakers come out. Monday, a huge day. That campaign in the transition period there when she was taking it over and now being that leading candidate per se for the Democrats, $100 million in a very short period of time they raise. And she has already gotten the support of some big time Democrats, especially in the House. You talk about Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, just to name a couple, Nancy Pelosi. And it seems like this has kind of opened the floodgates for others to back her. Do you think she is the only choice at this point?
Well, I mean, you cited a number of high-profile Democrats, but I think it is important to note that delegates from all over the country, including here in Ohio, have all unanimously gotten behind, or now in support of the Vice President Harris. And I think that's a testament to her energy, her skill, and her ability to build coalitions. And for her to do this in 48 hours is truly remarkable. And to see the flood of donations coming in, and let's be clear, a lot of this is organic money that's coming in. It's people who are around the country who have been, I think, really in the last several weeks concerned about where things were headed, or really energized. And we've not really seen anything like this in some time, maybe even since former President Obama. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. But look, this is going to be a tough race. No question about it. And I think a big part of this is expectations and understanding that while there's a surge of energy and donations and support and unity, which the Democrats really were hungry for, I think, while that is occurring right now, we still have quite a bit of ways to go to the election and need to remain focused and continue the hard work.
You use the word unity, which we have not seen from the Democrats the past several months. Do you think uniting behind her is more people? Do you think it's people wanting to come out and support her, or do you think it's a matter of Democrats having to do that to kind of show that united front and move forward as a whole?
I think the unity in support for the Vice President Harris is because of her ability, because of her incredible resume. I think some of the criticisms of her resume are really unfounded. This is a prosecutor, someone that was a U.S. Attorney General, Attorney General in California, a prosecutor in San Francisco, and the Vice President and the United States Senator, someone with really a lot of credentials. But I think it's an organic, natural support, particularly at the grassroots level, that we see in reaction to her candidacy, but also, I believe, a deep desire by many Americans, not just Democrats, to protect and preserve democracy. And I think she'll attempt to frame this race in the context of a prosecutor versus a felon. And I think that's what you're going to see going forward.
We're talking to Lou Gentile, a former state senator of the Democratic Party, with us. He served in the Eastern Ohio area for several years. Lou, we continue to talk about this situation that the Democrats are in. Now, like we said, 48 hours into this, the other topic that has been buzzing around is who will Kamala Harris select as a vice president. We have heard about a dozen names, I guess you could say, that are serious contenders. That list seems to be narrowing down a little bit just from what you're hearing. Of course, nothing official. What's your take on the entire situation and the amount of names that there are for her to choose from?
Well, it's very encouraging because there really is a number of really good choices. I think it's not too often that you get to see so many great choices. I think it speaks to the depth of the bench that the Democrats have. You start in Pennsylvania, just right over the border from Steubenville, with the governor there, Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, certainly atop of that list. Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Cooper, who's from Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, Governor Cooper of North Carolina, and then Senator Mark Kelly in Arizona would be another interesting choice, an astronaut, the husband of Gabby Giffords, who we know survived an assassination attempt. And that's just a handful of people. Honorable mention, people like Governor Andy Beshear down in Kentucky. And quite frankly, I've heard some Ohioans talk about our local native, Tim Ryan, who was really early on one of the first people to call for Vice President Harris to step in and become the nominee. But you got a number of great candidates, I think, that could bring really a lot of gravitas to the campaign and would help you in the Midwest. Someone like a Shapiro, someone like a Roy Moore, or I'm sorry, Roy Cooper, rather. People that can help you with some of the demographic that we need to go after in the Midwest and in parts of the country where Democrats need to be more competitive.
Do you think this idea of targeting these Midwest states, Rust Belt, whatever you might want to call them, is what needs to be done for Kamala Harris?
I think what I'm encouraged by is, look, if you look at the RNC last week and what the Republicans put forward, they put forward two candidates who really are on the same page in terms of issues, right? Essentially, J.D. Vance is sort of a mini-me of Donald Trump. He's part of that whole sort of, conversation around, everything that he parrots, basically everything that Donald Trump says, right? So you don't really expand the electorate. But I think if you look at this particular situation we're in, tapping somebody like a Governor Shapiro or Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, or Whitmer or Pritzker, people with executive experience, people who have won in competitive Midwestern states. So I think, I'm excited by this. And I think that in this particular instance, the choice that sometimes these choices don't really matter. I don't think it will really matter in the case of Trump and Vance, but I think in the case of Vice President Harris, it will matter who she selects. And if she selects somebody rooted in the Midwest who can win competitive states and understands the manufacturing and the culture and the economic base, I think that's going to go a long way to enhancing the ticket.
You mentioned Tim Ryan, so I want to ask you about him again. because that is fascinating, right? He loses the Senate race to JD Vance, and he's been out of politics now for a little bit, but he obviously has experience in Congress. What do you think his thoughts would be at that possibility? And do you think the American people would be familiar enough with him?
Yeah, I think those are fair questions. I thought he was probably among the very first here, and certainly in Ohio, but also nationally, to really step forward. And he actually, to be fair to him, very consistently over the past several years has been calling for a change in leadership. He has recognized that we need a bridge to the next generation, and has really been calling upon, the more senior leaders in the party to do that. So I think the probably top tier candidates we're looking at are the ones we've discussed, some of the governors throughout the Midwest. But as a local guy and somebody that I'm familiar with and thought did a great job for Ohio and for our region, certainly somebody I'd love to see be talked about more nationally.
As far as the timeline goes for this decision, do you think this is something the Democrats want to get done quickly before the convention, or do you think this is something we see maybe bleed into the days before the convention before we hear something?
It's a really good question. I think it could be something that we learn about sort of ahead of the convention before, similar to what we saw with the RNC. It's good to have that decision sort of made heading into the convention, I think. But I'm encouraged by the pool of candidates we have, Dylan. I think it's important to really note we have a number of people in the Midwest, across the country, who have established themselves in competitive Midwestern states. And you look at Pritzker, you look at Shapiro, you look at Whitmer, and Governor Cooper. You have a lot of people that I think could assume this role and add a lot of value to the ticket.
So we've seen this swift transition in about 48 hours from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. A lot of delegates, a lot of current lawmakers across the country, come out, they back her. Do you think this energy that we're seeing, not just from Kamala Harris on the trail, just in a couple of days that she's been out there, a couple of speeches, do you think the energy from the party and the supporters is sustainable as we as we march towards Election Day?
One of the things that I've been listening to a lot about Vice President Harris is that she brings a lot of energy, that she's a high energy person, high energy leader. And I think that helps her. And I think she's really grown a lot. I don't say that to be condescending, obviously, but I think her experience in this role as vice president, I think she spent a lot of time growing her background, her portfolio. And I think, obviously we're going to be in a tough election cycle, and they're going to throw a lot of things at her. But I think her experience as a prosecutor is really going to make a huge difference here. And look, in politics, it's all about momentum, and it's all about energizing the people that support you. And I can tell you, when you go into a campaign as she is now, and you have that enthusiasm, you have that motivation, you have that energy, which was lacking, which was missing, especially in the last 4 or 5 weeks, it does transform how people view the campaign and how people view your viability as a political leader.
All right, Lou, thank you so much. That'll do it for this short edition of Beyond the Podium with myself, Dylan Cleland. Lou Gentile, former Democratic state senator here in Eastern Ohio. Lou, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dylan Cleland. Thanks for watching. And here's another video to check out, and be sure to subscribe to our channel.